This is the College Football Inquirer, and we got to start with the big news on Sunday. Florida has fired head coach Billy Napier. I'm here with Stephen Godfrey. Ross Dellenger is not here, but Ross Dellenger did join past Andy and past Godfrey talking about all of the games on Saturday, the potential of the Florida job opening, the potential of some other big jobs opening, because that's how this works. The production schedule and real life don't always coincide. So, Godfrey, we need to talk about the immediate news, which is Florida firing Billy Napier. Godfrey, I was at the game last night. I thought it was Billy Napier's last game. It certainly felt like Billy Napier's last game, even though they won. It felt like everything had run its course. Florida has an open date before they play Georgia next week. This felt like time, and on Sunday afternoon, Florida made it official. Scott Strickland released a statement saying that Florida's a destination job. They'll go try to find the best coach they can find. Billy Gonzalez, the wide receivers coach, who has served under 3 different head coaches at Florida. He's been under Urban Meyer, Dan Mullen, and Billy Napier. He will be the interim coach. And hey, this is what we thought was going to happen, but it's one of those for the Florida fans. They've been waiting for this day for quite some time.
This was probably a decision that was made, let's say, not in the last 24 hours, right? This is something that's been long in the works. And
yeah, I'd say it was the bones of it were made. Well, let's put it this way. They decided to fire him after he lost to Texas A&M in 2024.
Right.
And then went back on that, decided to keep him, said, hey, here's some conditions to us keeping you. One of those being you hire a play calling offensive coordinator, which after he beat Ole Miss and LSU, he decided, I don't need to do that.
I'm good.
And so that kind of sowed the seeds. But then losing to USF in game 2 this year, I think that's where most of the people were pretty much out. And then they follow that quickly with losses to LSU and Miami. And you kind of knew where it was headed. Even when they beat Texas a couple weeks ago, it never seemed like it was going to last.
No, and if you look, if there's a lot of through lines here, but you're going to mention this as our past selves are about to take over in a second, in talking about the inconsistencies, procedural penalties, like I'll use a technical term here, brain farts across the Billy Napier tenure, where recruiting was good. There was a lot of potential. There was reason to be excited in between the seasons, and then it never really fully clicked, but in a really maddening way that was really unique to Napier. This couldn't win in a big game like James Franklin. This was just kind of shooting your toes off on a consistent basis.
Frequently, and never improving upon the things, because there were some big picture things that he did really well, like restocking the roster.
Definitely.
And then there were some big picture things that he didn't do well, and a lot of small detailed things that he didn't do well. And usually when you have big picture things you do well and some small stuff you need to clean up, you clean the stuff up.
Yeah. Well,
and it never did get cleaned up. Now, the other thing, Godfrey, with this particular situation that I think it was very maddening to Florida people is Steve Spurrier, Ron Zook, Urban Meyer, Will Muschamp, Jim McElwain, Dan Mullen, none of them got the toys, the bells and whistles, the massive staff. They didn't have the dedicated football building. Billy Napier got all of this.
Yes.
He got everything. It was the first Florida coach who really got all of this, who had, Urban Meyer got told no a ton while he was winning 2 national titles at Florida. Billy Napier got told yes to everything. And he produced a 22-23 record.
That's still a good thing if you're listening to this and you're a Florida fan, because what Florida did was very smart and not a given in the state of Florida. This is the story that was told across all the different programs of various size in the state of Florida, which was you thought winning was your birthright in the 1990s because the population shift to the state, the amount of football talent that was coming out, and the smarter programs who will go on to survive were the ones who realized, hey, everybody knows about south of I-4 now. Everybody knows that you're going to come in. Every good staff in college football has a Florida guy, right? So Florida investing and building and looking the same from the outside as an Alabama or Georgia or anyone else in the SEC is going to benefit this program long term. It's also going to make this job very attractive. They are, I don't know if they're resetting the market. I think it's very silly to argue about Penn State versus Florida. I think it's just 2 different kinds of luxury cars. I think that's what I said last Sunday before Penn State opened. So they are
I would agree
1 in 1A or 1A and 1B, however you want to determine this, but they will reset the market, certainly in this corner of the country.
So let's talk candidates, because obviously everybody wants to know who's next at Florida. The Florida fans, I think the major Florida donors, I think the Florida administration, their number one choice would be Lane Kiffin. I don't know if Lane Kiffin will take the job. It's not money. Ole Miss and Florida can offer the same amount of money.
Yes, correct.
So Lane Kiffin now 1 loss on the season. They go to Oklahoma this week. If you look at Ole Miss's schedule, if they beat Oklahoma, they are probably making the college football playoff. If they don't beat Oklahoma, they still might make the college football playoff. This is another part that's new this year, Godfrey. Transfer portal, the way it was constructed, when it did open, if you had a coach that was going to make the college football playoff, you're probably not going to get him. You probably can't get him in time. Now the transfer portal opens January 2nd. You might be able to hold out.
Let's assume for a second that Ole Miss makes the playoff. I feel like it's safe to say there's a strong chance that they would lose in the first round, depending on the seeding. I'm not saying it's impossible that they could win. I'm just saying
half the team,
half the teams are going to be out that make the playoff are going to be out of it by the time that portal opens. To your point, so it would not be impossible to wait out a first round. Now, past that,
second round's tough.
That's going to be uncharted.
Portal's not open yet,
right?
Portal's not open.
It would just be a very busy few days.
Yeah, you could go into the second round. So essentially 2/3 of the teams in the playoff would be out. So you're rolling the dice there. But it's something to think about. And again, I don't want to enrage the Ole Miss fans. I'm a Florida grad. You're an Ole Miss grad. But neither of us is that precious about it.
No.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you I think the Florida job is that much better than the Ole Miss job. I can't say that right now.
I think
I feel like
I'll say that
any decent SEC job that's well funded is a good job.
Yes, that I will say that marginally Florida is still a better position because of access to certain high schools versus other high schools in Mississippi. I think as an overall, there's still a concentration of talent. I think there's a brand recognition. I think they do a better job overall, but it's the margin between these jobs that has shrank so significantly, Andy, in the last couple of years, that it's not the no-brainer to jump up from an Ole Miss sort of place in the Southeastern Conference to go to a Florida. Just look at Lane Kiffin's a great example of this, because what Ole Miss fans think about all the time is 1998 and Tommy Tuberville. Tommy Tuberville went from Ole Miss to Auburn after swearing he'd never leave town, I'll die in a pine box or whatever, all that stuff that he said. Flash forward to, was it 3 cycles ago, Andy? Auburn is looking. This is before they hire Hugh Freeze. We think we can get Lane Kiffin. Why couldn't we get Lane Kiffin? It makes total sense. We are a superior brand to Ole Miss, and Lane Kiffin looks around, and some of this was personal, and there's some context there, but Lane Kiffin looks around and says, hey, you know what? These are roughly the same job. I can accomplish the same things here in Oxford that I can in Auburn. So Gainesville, to me, and Ross has talked about this on the show, there is still a perception of haves and have-nots in the Southeastern Conference, even when they are spending as much as they are on the football program in Oxford. I'm curious if that factors in. But as of right now, I think he is safer in Oxford than he has been, but I don't think it's impossible that he ends up in Gainesville.
Right. And that's the thing. If he just wants to live in Florida, if he's just always wanted to be Florida's coach, these are the things that matter personally to people, which may be him. We'll find out.
Yeah.
We'll find out. We're not going to know definitively for a couple of months on this. Other names, in case it's not Lane Kiffin. Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri. And I said this on my On 3 show. What do Florida fans want? They want a guy who wears a visor, who scores points, who talks trash. That could be Lane Kiffin, or it could be Eli Drinkwitz. That describes the same person.
Eli's wearing more visors these days than Lane is. I think Lane's kind of...
I know, Lane's going visorless. So, But Eli is one that if you mention that name to a Florida fan, they will recoil.
Why?
Because they are like, well, he's weird. And I'm like, because he said mean things to Dan Mullen? You say mean things to Dan Mullen.
I mean, in today's context, wouldn't OBC be considered weird by a certain measure?
And that is the argument.
Right.
Tennessee fans hated Steve Spurrier. Georgia fans
still
hated
do.
Steve Spurrier.
Still do.
Yeah.
Still, yes.
Oh, no, they respect him now. They venerate him now.
A little bit.
Because he's not beating them anymore.
Living in Nashville, it's still not something they look back with as much fondness as we do. I'll put it that way. I think Eli Drinkwitz makes a ton of sense. I think Eli Drinkwitz is also someone who Penn State might be doing their due diligence on right now. It's a good time to be Eli Drinkwitz. I would also add this. because I know we're going to get there eventually. We're going to talk about Auburn down the road. We're going to talk about John Summerall, which is sort of the made ready to order SEC head coach.
Here's the thing, and this is one of my pet peeves.
Yeah.
I bet you Florida will not even vet John Summerall because they're not going to hire a Group of 5 coach after Billy Napier. I think it's the dumbest thing ever that you refuse to hire someone like the last guy you hired. Like Penn State could potentially not consider Clark Lee, who's one of the best coaches in the country, because he's the Vandy coach and James Franklin was the Vandy coach.
Absolutely. Here's where I'm going with Summerall as it relates to Florida. It's not Summerall to Gainesville, because I've heard the similar things, and I think the disposition and, a lot of times in these as much money and as much mind share goes into hiring coaches, sometimes, Andy, it is as dumb as we can't look like we're doing the same thing, even though it's not the same thing. Billy Napier is not John Summerall and vice versa. And 2, they're similar paths. They're not identical. But if Florida is able to pull away Lane Kiffin, what could be really, really interesting, Andy, and something I would watch for, is that the John Summerall market would then reset with Auburn with a pending opening. That's kind of how we're treating Hugh Freeze right now.
Whoa,
Auburn and Ole Miss.
You're thinking one step behind.
Okay, keep going.
There's another job that might be a Summerall type job.
Well, there's a few. Now we can do Tallahassee in a second.
Florida State.
Yes, Tallahassee in a second. Inside the SEC, which is where I'm told ultimately Summerall would prefer to be, although if Florida State wants to make a big swing.
Florida State is a de facto SEC school.
Spiritually.
For the purposes of coaching jobs.
I think on the episode you're about to watch, I did say they're spiritually SEC or something akin to it.
Yeah.
You would get into another Ole Miss versus Auburn race, because Auburn is sort of considered the destination for Summerall right now. If Ole Miss is open because Lane goes to Gainesville, they will fight tooth and nail for their former, I believe, linebackers coach, John Summerall, who has been to Mississippi, been recruited in that state. It could get very aggressive between those two schools if Kiffin were to leave for Gainesville.
That is correct. And so you've got that. I'm also going to throw another name out there who I do not think is leaving.
Okay.
But I think if you are Florida, if you are Penn State, you have to call this person and you have to ask. This is sort of like walking up to the prettiest girl in school and asking her to the prom just because why not? You got to shoot your shot. Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, we talked about this.
I think if you're Florida and Penn State, you need to call Marcus Freeman and make him tell you no, because he's the kind of maximum ideal right now of what everybody would want. And
well, to that end, would you also do this with Lanning?
You can, but Lanning has made it so clear that he's not leaving, and his buyout situation is so prohibitive. I don't think there's any chance. But you could try. I mean, but he's not going anywhere, and I don't think Marcus Freeman's going anywhere either.
No, but we talked about this earlier in the week with Penn State. Your job right now, in the very, very short term, in the interim, is not necessarily to focus on your intended target or your actual next head coach. It's to create the prestige of this job, especially in Florida's case, because it's been a down few years. The context of people our age, Andy, in Florida sort of exists without this formidable Georgia. Like, as I was coming up and I was in college in the SEC and covering the SEC.
Georgia was down bad in the 90s.
Right.
Well, not that bad. They were pretty good, but could never get over the hump against Spurrier.
Perpetually second place, even like as you get into the aughts. I remember like the Terrence Edwards drop.
And remember, Tennessee was good too then.
Right. Florida has to reestablish itself in the market in a substantial way. So until you land on Coach X, whoever it may be, I agree with you that much like Penn State, kind of in a similar situation as it relates to Ohio State, go out and make this thing look as big as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and so other names, Jed Fish at Washington, Florida grad. His first job was basically doing whatever Steve Spurrier wanted him to do. Like he left Post-it notes on Steve Spurrier's car till he got a volunteer job. And then Brent Key at Georgia Tech, I think, is going to get some interest. The name, I think, I don't think you can sell him right now at one of the bigger jobs like Florida, is Fran Brown at Syracuse. I think if you put Fran Brown in the SEC, he will put together the nastiest, most dominant rosters you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
But I don't know, because they're not having a great year against the ACC's toughest schedule this year. I don't think you can sell it. But I'm telling you right now, whoever hires Fran Brown, whoever's smart enough to bring Fran Brown to the SEC or the Big Ten, is going to put together some just formidable rosters.
I don't think less of Penn State than I do of Florida, but I do think because of the geography involved in Fran Brown's background, that
he's a Jersey guy.
Getting him to Penn State I think there's a logical way to sell that now, even with the short amount of time at Syracuse, the not so great season they're having now. But ball knowers, if you will, we talked about how Syracuse's roster was not going to be as good as last year's in the short term while he actually sort of got his hands on recruiting and portal and the rest of that. Like, Syracuse is very much a long-term project. Because we're evaluating early, I would not hold 25 against Fran Brown. I think it could work in Happy Valley. I think back in the SEC, and again, I don't think less of one job or the other. I just think it's a harder sell, to your point, that at any of these open SEC jobs.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. I mean, those are all good head coaches. Like, Brent Key is at his alma mater. There's a few guys at their alma maters that are going to have to decide whether they want to stay at their alma mater or take a bunch of money. Brent Key may be one of those. Kenny Dillingham may be one of those. I'm not saying for the Florida job necessarily. I'm just saying because there's going to be so many open jobs.
Tallahassee is where I see Kenny Dillingham.
That is,
I could see him killing at the Arizona State of the East.
Is a logical fit. He was the OC there under Norvell. So yeah, it is distinctly possible that if Florida State does make a move, and you'll hear me and Godfrey and Ross talking about that later in the show.
Yeah.
That's one. Godfrey, I think we've covered it pretty thoroughly, because I think this will connect to the conversation that our past selves had about this job.
Let's talk to ourselves a couple hours ago about what we kind of knew was going to happen.
All right, let's time travel, everybody. This is the College Football Inquirer with Ross Dellenger and Stephen Godfrey. I am Andy Staples. And gentlemen, the college football playoff race is feeling very hot right now. It was hard to decide what game to talk about first, because there are so many games that impacted it. Nobody seems to be quite out of the thing yet, but it's close. It's close on a couple of occasions. And then Notre Dame is probably the logical place to start, because there was a moment during the Notre Dame USC game where it looked like USC might be able to knock Notre Dame out of college football playoff contention. And that moment lasted about 45 seconds of real time, because then Jadarian Price returned a kickoff 100 yards and Notre Dame was back in control. But guys, Notre Dame lost 2 games to start this season, but they feel like they are very much in the hunt now after beating USC.
Not going to beat the allegations if you're USC going into the Big Ten when you allow that kind of run game, right? This is
7 yards a carry.
The first half total does not, I can't remember it, but the announcers were keying on that in the first half. It was basically it was like a full game rushing total. And I think they finished over 300.
They did.
Sometimes it's that simple to tell a story, guys. Sometimes it's just that easy to explain an entire game.
Jeremiah Love set a Notre Dame stadium record for a Notre Dame player for rushing yards in a game with 228. Notre Dame Stadium has existed for 95 years.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't need to go further than that. This is...
And all of a sudden, right here we are. Like, we talked about this week 2 or week 3, right? Can Notre Dame be a playoff team without dropping the first 2 games? And here we sit where they're looking pretty dang good. And if you look at the schedule, it sets up for them to go 10-2, especially if they continue with a run game like that. And, the run game at Notre Dame was sort of overshadowed what we've seen from first-year starter CJ Carr. I mean, there's a lot of first-year quarterbacks in the country. I'm sure we'll get to the one down in Austin, Texas again later. But they're all a lot of them are struggling. And CJ Carr is not. He's looked really good and composed, and he's had a couple of big 300+ games. He didn't need that, obviously, last night. And as Godfrey said, the whole narrative of USC lacking, the lines and the toughness and the physicality to compete in the Big Ten, sort of came out in this game Saturday, which is weird because a week ago, right, they did a pretty good job of that against a Michigan team, but not in South Bend with the weather and all that fun stuff.
I would be remiss, Andy, if I did not quickly shout out that CJ Carr interception. We're going to clean that up. We got to clean.
Well, look,
we're going to clean that one up, guys.
There were a lot of those, but that one was.
Let's not do that in December.
This was CJ Carr's toughest game so far. USC actually did handle their pass game pretty well, but it's fine. CJ Carr as a first-year starter has been as good as you'd expect, maybe a little better. You're going to have an off day, and the thing is, when you're running the ball like that, it's okay. You're going to be all right. This is one of those interesting. We're going to bounce around because I think this is more of a global conversation with the playoff. Because I don't know if there's a group happier with Notre Dame's win than the Miami Hurricanes, who lost to Louisville on Friday night. And the complicating factor with Miami losing is that Miami may get blocked from the ACC championship game the way things are going. So they don't have a lot of opportunities for quality wins the rest of the way. But if you're Miami and Notre Dame is 10-2 and Notre Dame is in position to make the playoff, and as long as you don't drop below 10-2, you should be ahead of Notre Dame because you beat them when they played. So Notre Dame kind of acts as a floor for Miami in the college football playoff race. And if Notre Dame's in, Miami's still in.
God, Miami.
I mean, we would probably need to explain the situation here. So it is a logjam right now in the ACC. That's what Andy was referring to.
Yes.
Like, we probably should stop talking about Miami as a lock because Georgia Tech can't lose football games. Like, this is Miami does not have a pole position quite like we thought they did.
Oh, they don't have it at all because Louisville is still in the mix. Virginia is still in the mix. SMU is still undefeated in ACC play.
Yeah.
So
no, they're in a crowded one-loss group with the likes of Pitt and Duke and Louisville and Cal. Like, this is not as clear-cut as we thought it was even just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, Pitt's playing a lot better as well now, and so all of a sudden, it's like really clustered up. I mean, shoot, Duke is playing really well too. I mean, Duke lost to Illinois and Georgia Tech, and I think they were like, they missed on like 4 or 5. Well, they missed like those 2 games. They missed on like 4 or 5 trips in the red zone where they came up empty. So they're playing really well between the 20s. If they were playing well enough in the red zone as the 20s, they may be 6-1, but they're 3-1 in the ACC still. Right now as it sits. So it is clustered up, and it's just wild to me that at the top of the ACC is Georgia Tech and Virginia somehow keeps surviving too, right? They got a safety to win a game, not a game securing safety at the same, a game leading safety in a tie game, which
a go ahead safety
very often. Go ahead safety, yes.
The go ahead safety.
Yes.
That sounds like somebody's podcast in 2 years.
Yes, it does. It does.
that is the best Group of 5 podcasts in the history of the world.
There you go.
The go ahead
safety. I like it.
And then it's offshoot, the 1-point safety. But yes, there's so much intrigue there. And then you've got the Notre Dame aspect of it. You've got what's going on in the Big 12 with Texas Tech losing.
Yeah.
I will put my hand up and admit I was wrong. I thought that Texas Tech was going to lap the field in terms of talent. I thought they had really built a much better roster, but they lost to Arizona State. Arizona State controlled that game for most of the game. Texas Tech comes back, takes the lead toward the end, but then Arizona State takes it right back. And all of a sudden, the Big 12 is a muddled race again, which is what we expected. But last week, I'm sitting here telling you, oh, no, Texas Tech is so much better than everybody else. No. BYU is now in control in the Big 12 because they
beat Cincinnati
on the Holy War. And
Cincinnati's at 4-0 in the Big 12 came out of nowhere. Remember the Cincinnati? It was the first. Was it the Thursday night game against Nebraska? And they played really well, right? They took Nebraska right to the wire. And we're seeing that maybe they're really are a legitimate team over there. Satterfield's got them playing really well. And then Houston 3-1. So everybody's jumping. Arizona State, Texas Tech at 3-1. So that's a jumbled mess too. And then of course BYU, right? Surviving the Holy War. Bear Bachmeier led the Cougars back. They were down early in the fourth quarter, I think, and then stormed back to win that game. 3rd straight Holy War win.
Oh, that's big time.
Yeah,
absolutely. The Utah fans are starting to get mad at Kyle Whittingham, but
there is a head coach in place. Apparently, we always know that there's transition plans
for a while.
Yeah,
We always,
years at least. Yeah,
Those transition plans never, ever backfire, or always.
No, they always work out, don't they? Hey, how about you were talking about each of the conferences and each of the playoff spots, Andy. One remained SEC unbeaten, like we all thought, Texas A&M.
Just how we drew it up. Yeah. Well, you were at a game involving one of the SEC unbeatens going into yesterday, and they didn't come out of it unbeaten. You were at Ole Miss, Georgia. Ross, did you feel for the punters? They looked bored.
Yeah, I know. They were bored, right? We didn't have a punt until I think there were 13 minutes left in the game, I believe, I want to say, or it was either late in the third quarter. I can't remember. But it was really late. Ole Miss scored on each team scored on its first 5 drives. Georgia actually scored on every drive of the game, as it turned out. But we opened the game with an 11 drive scoring streak. So 11 total drives ended in a score. 5 touchdowns for Ole Miss. I think it was 2 field goals and 4 touchdowns for Georgia. It was wild. It was a crazy game. It was a weird one, obviously, with the scoring stuff. You know, the most interesting thing I thought came afterward in Kirby Smart's news conference, where he basically said the quiet part out loud. We're not as talented as we were, and we can't just beat you. We can't destroy everybody like we used to because of the transfer portal.
This is monumental, Ross.
This
is a good thing. This is a good thing.
I wrote about it. It's a great thing. We should all celebrate the parity that we're seeing in the talent distribution that we're seeing in college football. And Kirby was launched into all the talking points of how the games are, especially in the SEC, sort of like the NFL, and that the margins are so tight because the talent is spread out.
Yeah, I think this is a good thing for Georgia, Ross, because yesterday, once again, I have to give them begrudgingly, I have to give this offense its flowers. They get into shootouts against better offenses, and they've won twice this year. It had shades of the Tennessee game. Gunnar Stockton looked as good yesterday as he did against Tennessee, which is something that's hard to say when you watch all those other games that he plays. They are playing at the level of their opponent, and it is working out for them most of the time. And the fact that Kirby's admitting that maybe we're going to get out of that 2012 Alabama mindset, and they're going to start understanding that they have to adapt in real time. I think this was huge for Georgia.
It also, like we've talked about, you've got to be able to win in multiple ways to win a national championship. And Georgia has shown that it can. You've seen 2 shootout wins between Tennessee and Ole Miss. You saw a slog win against Auburn. I think they're capable of it. Kirby's right. They're not as good as they were. Like they will not be able to suffocate you defensively. They'll be able to suffocate bad teams. Like they suffocated Auburn in the second half. But no, good teams are going to score on them. Like that is something that you just kind of have to accept as a fact. The good thing is they've got an offense led by Gunnar Stockton that seems capable of keeping up in a game like that. And, you know, I think that Alabama-Georgia game that we watched a couple weeks ago may be your SEC championship preview. We'll see. Texas A&M still undefeated. By the way, guys, is Bobby Petrino forever doomed to lose by 3 just over and over again? Because, like, they're playing Auburn this week. Would not shock me one bit if Auburn beats Arkansas by 3.
Someone must win.
Yeah, exactly. Someone must. That I know. The Auburn game was brutal last night. A 4th straight loss in a tight game that they partially controlled. And hot on the plains, as it always is. It stays hot on the plains.
It's a sunglass tax. It's honestly the fact that you decided to wear sunglasses the entire game. Like you're at the World Series of Poker in 1982, and the universe adjusts accordingly. But anyways, he's your man. I'm sure that's going to work out for you guys.
Yeah. So Texas A&M still undefeated, 7-0 for the first time since 1994. So they are very much in the hunt.
I feel really good about picking them for the playoff beginning of the season when I got laughed at.
Yeah, and they go to LSU next week, which brings us to the game you attended, Stephen Godfrey. You were at the LSU Vanderbilt game. We talked about it last week. Vanderbilt was favored. This was not a fluke. It was a sharp line because Vanderbilt is just better than LSU now.
Yes, sir. I sat next to your colleague, Pete Nakos from On 3, and there were 3 or 4 times in the first half where we just quietly remarked, wow, look at the lines, look at the team speed. they are matching that team across from them. It felt inevitable. Vanderbilt controlled the game pretty much after that. LSU had a really nice scripted drive that ended in a field goal. By the way, Ross, I don't know if our game had a punt until the third quarter either. It was. I don't know if it was as pronounced as Ole Miss Georgia, but I remember when a punter came on thinking, oh, that hasn't happened yet. And it was after halftime. Pavia versus the Blake Baker pressure scheme was, at one point, it almost looked like Vanderbilt was setting up pass plays with 4 wide on third down just to draw everyone away so that he could break out and run through giant gaps in the middle of the field. I have stanned the Blake Baker defense at LSU, and there were key moments yesterday where it looked like they were doing the exact opposite thing that you would want to do against Diego Pavia. Now, on the other side of the ball, it's the same story. Vanderbilt went after LSU every chance they could to put hands on Garrett Nussmeier, who looked really good in the first half when they did that. He made a lot of good throws on third and long when they brought pressure, like really keyhole NFL throws. The problem was they can't run the football. Their offense is based off of Nussmeier being a level of healthy that I don't think is possible this season. It's pretty much that simple. This is also, that offensive line, guys, is really bad. It is legitimately bad.
Yeah, they lost their left tackle early in the game and had to move DJ Chester out there, and it was not.
And he had I saw him after the game. He was exhausted physically and mentally, talking to people after the games. Like I was watching the players. I kind of lingered around the LSU contingent to see what the mindset was for larger things other than just losing to Vanderbilt. It's a dejected group right now in terms of players. But I remember I watched Chester specifically, Andy, and he was spent. Like, they have asked those guys to do something that's just not possible right now with this offense.
It's hot down there in the bayou.
Yes, sir.
And I do sort of wonder how this unfolds, because I think it is getting to the point that we're seeing sort of the fan base just sort of leap off. The ones that were holding on sort of get off. Kind of like in Gainesville, Andy, right? We talked about Florida and Billy Napier, and that really happened with Billy last year, but we know that story about why they kept him and everything. But I do feel like they're in a similar space down there in Baton Rouge. And I'll say this, I visited down there in February. We talked about my story in the spring on this. They were behind in NIL for several years, way behind, especially their SEC counterparts. They weren't behind this year. Nope. They weren't behind. They were right there with everybody else.
Ross, I would argue maybe they're not doing it correctly. I don't know if the application is as smart. And I also saw as the team and the managers, all that kind of stuff, were leaving. It's a very public space at the Vanderbilt Stadium. A lot of the LSU visiting, and it was about a 50-50 crowd, were MFing Kelly to the players with their families, and there wasn't a lot of pushback. Like this fan base is very fed up in a very vocal way. And as we are wont to do with Brian Kelly rosters, you're not seeing a lot of rallying around the leader.
Well, it's interesting because the LSU fan base was kind of the thought leader on this. This was not something that came from a national perspective. And that is often how it happens with LSU. Ross can tell you, like, when the fan base was out on Les Miles, it was long before everyone outside Louisiana figured out that Les was washed.
Andy, I kind of think it's the opposite this time.
No, listen, when they lost to Ole Miss, it was their first loss, and their fan base is like, we're done with this guy. He's not going to get it done. And we're all looking at it like, you're fine. Like, you can still make the playoff.
This was supposed to be the 13-0 year, though. This was supposed to be. We invested all this money. Nussmeier, they're all back. This was supposed to be 13-0.
The criticisms that were raised nationally. Here's why it's different than Orgeron and Miles and everybody after Nick Saban. Legitimate criticisms of Kelly that have been raised the last 2 seasons by the media were vociferously rebuked by our friends down on the bayou. Even going through this offseason where people were pointing out, hey, they really got to do this. We haven't seen this yet. This could be a problem. This could be a problem. Now, when they did lose to Ole Miss, as the luster of that Clemson Week 1 win was fading, Andy, then you saw the flip. And now, like yesterday, I'm watching them scream with neck veins bulging. But they were out on Miles faster than they finally came around on Kelly. They've come around and it's kind of been like a tidal wave all at once.
Well, they were holding Kelly at arm's length, and they're like, oh, you did the stuff in the transfer portal. Maybe this is going to be okay. But the second it looked like one side of the ball wasn't working, which seems to be the problem with all of Brian Kelly's LSU teams, then they turned. And so they are mathematically still alive for the college football playoff, but they play Texas A&M this week. They have an open date, and then they play Alabama. They have to win both of those games if they'd like to stay mathematically alive. And I think the feeling is that's not going to happen because we've seen those teams play the way Alabama's playing right now. We haven't mentioned Alabama, Tennessee, but Alabama smoked Tennessee. The pick six before halftime was the nail in Tennessee's coffin, and then Alabama was just rolling the rest of the way. Like, Alabama's playing like the best team in the country right now. It's either them or Ohio State or Indiana. And I just don't see how LSU beats them. Maybe LSU can beat Texas A&M. We'll see. But if we remember the second half of last year's game, Marcel Reed is a puzzle that LSU's defense seems to struggle to solve.
Just one more thing on that offense. I came away more impressed with Nuss because I hadn't seen him in person yet. And if they produce another quarterback that ends up as an NFL starter with Jaden Daniels, but these are the results they're getting in the process of producing these NFL quarterbacks, that's just going to be a bridge too far. It looks like they're wasting another NFL quarterback's prime season again under Brian Kelly.
Well, and I'll throw this is where the LSU fans, because everybody, Brian Kelly said they were spoiled, and he's right, they are spoiled, but sure, it's your fault for not realizing that. So Nick Saban, Les Miles, Ed Orgeron, all three of them won a national title by year 4. It is year 4. Brian Kelly, I feel very safe in saying this, is not going to win a national title this year.
No.
I feel very safe in saying they are not going to make the playoff this year. I feel very safe in saying they're probably going to lose at least 4 games this year. And that is where they sort of fall off the cliff, because we're going to talk about this when we get to the Florida State stuff too. I stayed up till way too late or way too early, depending on your perspective, watching Florida State lose to Stanford. But there are buyouts that seem impossible. But after James Franklin last week, nothing seems impossible. So the Brian Kelly buyout, which is the Brian Kelly buyout, which is close to $60 million. Feels possible now.
Nothing is impossible.
Same with Norvell, right? It's 55.
Nothing.
They're both in the 50s, I think.
Yeah, Ross, we made fun of going into week 1 when this incarnation of the show started. You and I made fun of on microphone people who are dissatisfied with Florida State, with USC. That one's not going to happen. With LSU, just the mega buyout concept of people thinking they were going to swallow a Jimbo-sized pill. Things have changed dramatically. They have changed, I would say, alarmingly. And people inside the agent and coaching community are like, there is no buyout that's too big right now. Because of the uncertainty ahead of this sport, right now, we flipped our calculus all the way around. Last year was about saving money and hoarding pennies because we don't know what's going to happen. This year, all of a sudden, is about spending money as much as we can. We'll figure it out later because we cannot afford to look complacent. And so no one is safe, not in Baton Rouge and not in Tallahassee.
It's the ultimate seller's market if you're a coach who's pretty good or an agent who represents coaches. Because like you just said, Godfrey, you can't be perceived as complacent. You can't be perceived as willing to stay stuck, as willing to stay stagnant when your coach has revealed himself. So this is going to be the conversation. We'll talk Florida in a second. We'll talk Florida State in a second. But Wisconsin, that's going to be the conversation in the coming weeks there.
Yep.
Auburn, it's going to be the conversation in the coming weeks there. LSU, if they lose 2 more games, it is definitely going to be the conversation. So that is Michigan State is a place where it probably is going to be the conversation.
That last one is one where I held off up until very, very recently, where I thought it's been 2, and you inherited a very unique situation coming off the Tucker scandal, and now I really don't know if anyone is safe at this point. Ryan Day, Kirby Smart, pretty safe. Pretty safe.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, what have you done for me in the last 6 days. That's how people are thinking.
It is going to be a bananas coaching carousel. And let's talk about that when we come back, because I was at a game yesterday too, and I think it was the last game for the particular head coach who won it. We'll talk about it when we come back. Welcome back to the College Football Inquirer, where we are talking massive buyouts. And my God, this Stanford-Florida State game was such a mess. It was horrible. It ended with both backup quarterbacks playing. Yeah. It ended on a replay review where it looked like Gavin Sawchuk scored. I'm going to come right out and say it. It looked like Gavin Sawchuk scored, but it's one of those games, and I think I realized this covering the Florida-Mississippi State game as well. There are certain games for ESPN where they just don't send a lot of cameras. And so it's like 2 TV cameras and 4 iPhones.
They shoot from the roof in Palo Alto too. I've been there for games where it has a more downward slope, which is not a great visual. I received this text from you this morning. It said, I stayed up, watched it live. It was worse than you can possibly imagine. So it wasn't like you said, guys, you went to bed or you weren't paying attention and you missed this epic barn burner. This was just a smoldering trash fire until the wee hours.
The thing about it is, because of the Florida State situation, and I'm in the state of Florida, I know a lot of Florida State people.
Yeah.
I knew this was getting more serious than I think people in the rest of the country realize. Mike Norvell's buyout is so freaking big because he was a legitimate candidate to replace Nick Saban when Nick Saban retired. It was
that's a real sentence, kids. Yeah. That really happened.
It was Kalen DeBoer and Mike Norvell. Remember, Mike Norvell was coming off 13-0 ACC championship. And so, but it is a legitimate issue. They've lost their last 9 ACC games. They are 5-15 since winning the ACC championship game in 2023. 5-15. And the win against Alabama seems like an even bigger aberration now than it did the day it happened. There feels like there's no hope right now at Florida State. And this is a school that sued the ACC, that is trying to get out of the ACC. They are doing everything they can to try to be relevant in college football. Mm-hmm. And if they just sit there and stagnate, at least this is the feeling of the people in charge and the people who make decisions there. If they just sit there and stagnate, then they will not get where they want to go. And so they may have to bite the bullet on this thing. And it is so freaking much money.
Ross, there are Power 2 schools that are helmets, I call them, or brands, right? And then there are ne'er-do-wells inside of that structure. Obviously, Indiana was the new cul-de-sac millionaire. And I say that positively, good for them. But then you have the helmets or the brands that live outside the Power 2. And we have talked a lot over the last couple of years of Florida State and Clemson, but kind of more Florida State, right? Florida State was the Tiffany brand through the 90s, and they had this history. Miami's included in that. There's a handful that are included in that, but it's a short list. And it seems like Florida State was the most vocal and, pardon the pun, the tip of the spear when it came to suing their own league, right? Trying to financially keep up with in-state rivals and the SEC, because it's an SEC fan base. It's geographically, culturally. When I said earlier about you can't afford to be complacent, I'm thinking about Florida State. I'm not really thinking about any other program. Is that fair? Because you've looked at the money and how they are trying to scramble to stay relevant, and now it seems like they've overspent, but they have to keep doing that.
Yeah, it's I'm sure they'll never invite me back because I was with them during the Virginia game and then with them all week during the Miami game as well. And so I saw them sort of go off the cliff, which was so unexpected at that game in Charlottesville. And I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago when my story came out about how much money they are investing, basically $400 million in facilities, the stadium, plus the football facility that's opening. By the way, I think this week the team is moving into the football facility, the new football facility. But not only that, they spent, they front loaded like everybody else, several million, 8+ million over the spring, went out in the portal and kind of overhauled the offense. I think they've gotten I think they have like 6-7 starters maybe on offense that are from the portal. 3 or 4 offensive linemen, obviously the quarterback, running back. I mean, you could just go receiver, their top receiver. I mean, all of them, right? They spent on the portal. Then of course Gus Malzahn, right, and Tony White at coordinators, both changed coordinator. You talk about millions and millions of dollars for new facilities and an overhaul of a roster and a coaching staff, and 3 and 4.
And
4 in a row.
Stanford, and Stanford, let me tell you guys, is bad.
That's a dead body,
Stanford,
guys.
Really bad.
I was looking at their numbers this morning. This may be the worst team in FBS, Andy. Or in the power group.
Stanford, you lost to Stanford playing their backup quarterback, because Ben Gulbranson I believe he was out before halftime. So this is one of the worst losses of Norvell's tenure, and it just like it keeps getting worse. And I told you I stayed up really late. I stayed up to watch this press conference. That's one of the saddest things I've ever seen. It was a man who was utterly defeated and out of answers. And I watched, 3 press conferences like this last night. Hugh Freeze's was like this after they lost to Missouri, after Auburn lost to Missouri in overtime. It was, I'm out of answers. But at least Hugh Freeze did hint at a potential quarterback change for the Arkansas game, which maybe that is enough to keep him going for a little bit longer. And like Auburn doesn't have to do anything yet.
Yeah, that's what it is, to be honest.
And the other one I was at was in person. I was at Billy Napier's press conference after Florida beat Mississippi State. That game, guys. Have you ever seen the home crowd chant fire, insert coach's name here, with 38 seconds remaining in a game that they're winning?
In conference.
Because that happened.
And then when he walked off the field after they'd won, right?
No, they booed him out of the tunnel, didn't they, Andy?
They booed him out of the tunnel.
He walked behind Mekhi Barrow. And I'll set the scene here. So the reason they were chanting Fire Billy with 38 seconds to go in a game they were winning by 2 was because Mississippi State had the ball in field goal range. The only thing that kept Florida from losing this game is Jeff Lebby. I'm not sure if this is Jeff Lebby or Blake Shapen. I'm going to ultimately put it on Jeff Lebby, because if it was an RPO call that Blake Shapen decided to throw instead of hand off, it's Jeff Lebby's fault for calling an RPO instead of just calling a handoff.
Yeah.
Why were they throwing the ball? But they were. And so Blake Shapen threw the ball to a 342-pound defensive tackle named Mekhi Barrow. That interception saved the game for Florida. By the way, why was Florida only up 2? Because they scored a touchdown early in the fourth quarter. It was their first fourth quarter point since the USF game in week 2, by the way. They scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter with about 13 minutes to go. They immediately decided to go for 2. They immediately put 12 men on the field.
Oh, God.
The umpire throws his flag, and then the referee throws his flag just for fun.
Oh.
And
Andy,
it was so obvious there were 12 guys on the field. And
Andy,
it wasn't like some guy was running off. They lined up in formation with 12. So they get moved back 5 yards. They are up 12. The idea of going for 2 is to be up 14, because that is a key number. The math does not change because you move back 5 yards.
Yeah.
What does Billy Napier do? He sends out the extra point team.
Andy, have you ever in your career seen a tenure at a power program, however you want to define that, marked so consistently by, I don't know what you would call it, poor structure from the head coaching point? Like they have so many
sloppiness,
undisciplined tech stuff.
Can I give you guys another one?
And yeah, go ahead. I mean, like, it's been like that his entire time. He's never cleaned it up ever.
Yep, never. No, it never made it. Never once made it better. Second quarter, they're facing a 3rd and 7. He calls a quarterback draw that has no chance of succeeding. Obviously, DJ Lagway gets tackled after a gain of 2. The fans boo vociferously. But hey, it's a 34-yard field goal for Trace Mack. No problem. They get a delay of game, putting the field goal team on the field, even though there was no question they were going to kick a field goal. So that's a 39-yard field goal. He makes a 39-yard field goal. Oh, no, personal foul on one of the offensive linemen. It's now a 54-yard field goal. Fortunately for Billy Napier, and this is kind of the story of Billy Napier, he's made the roster so talented that they sometimes win in spite of his coaching. Trace Mack's a really good kicker. He hits a bomb 54-yarder. He had a 53-yarder later. But like that's the story of Florida. And so Billy Napier in that press conference acted like a man who knows what's coming. I'd say all week he acted like a man who knows what's coming. I think that's coming. Like, this is not the James Franklin thing last week where we talked about it like, it'd be crazy if they fired James Franklin today, and then they do. It would not be crazy if they fire Billy Napier today. It would be probably the thing we would expect.
No, he's been on the gallows for weeks. I mean, essentially since South Florida.
After South Florida,
Yeah. This has been talked about since then. I'm kind of at a loss. I don't know what's left to say about the Napier era. I do want to transition this a little bit by going backwards, Andy. Auburn and Florida have had moments where we can pop them today. We can get this done. I've heard conflicting things from both camps and from, third parties out there in the industry that, well, what's the rush? Now, we've seen other schools rush. There are a couple of ways we can explain this, and we've done this on the show before, but specifically with Auburn and Florida, there's this idea emerging, especially at Auburn, that you might as well hang on for a little bit with him. See what you can do to keep the roster going. Don't give, if you are John Cohen, don't give DJ Durkin time to make noise as an interim head coach.
But it's a very different situation, because if DJ Durkin takes over Auburn, I suspect, remember, the Auburn games that he's losing are close. Hugh Freeze is losing close games.
Right.
DJ Durkin might win those games.
That's right. And that was something that was expressed this week by multiple people.
Florida, there is no obvious interim. There is no former power conference head coach on the staff. Like there's so if they pick an interim, Ron Roberts, maybe the defensive coordinator. I would suspect maybe the receivers coach Billy Gonzalez, who has served at Florida under Urban Meyer and Dan Mullen and Billy Napier, because he's not a Billy Napier guy. And I think someone who's a little more loyal to the logo than the head coach.
Yeah, and I think that it's like old boy at Florida State, Odell, who's been there forever. People ask a lot, what is the blueprint for this? And I think it really comes down to every single situation, because we talked about how Virginia Tech was worried about literally physically no one coming to the stands, like no one coming to the games for the rest of the season. You had to inject something in the interim, which was a long period of time. UCLA, different story, where they felt like they had bottomed out and had absolutely no buy-in from the roster. If you're Auburn, if you're Florida, I do think Florida's going to happen probably it will have already happened as people are absorbing this video show or audio show.
They have an open date before they play Georgia. So
Auburn,
if logically it makes sense.
Auburn, to me, seems like they'll just stand put and then they'll get it done when it's historically time to do this.
What if they get Petrino though?
I was going to save this for later this week. There is a lot of history around Hugh Freeze, Bobby Petrino. Like, I want to watch this game, like the coach's film room for the national championship on ESPN, in a room with Houston Nutt. I want to find Houston Nutt this week and just sit and watch this game with him. There's so much more backstory than we can get into on this recap show.
Yes, that'd be a great story.
22 years ago, Jetgate. 22 years ago. If you don't know what Jetgate is,
you can do it really fast. Yeah,
we'll talk about it probably this week. But Google
there's a lot of history. In an otherwise mediocre conference game in the SEC coming up this week, there is a ridiculous amount of off-field history. And I do think, Andy, if Petrino were to like punk those guys, then maybe you go ahead and do it. Otherwise, it feels like the decision has been made at Auburn. They will probably enter close to the automatic lead in the John Summerall sweepstakes. And then they can afford to stand down for a little bit until the time comes, which is just going to be closer to the Iron Bowl.
John Summerall is someone I would want to talk to if I was Florida State, if I happen to have an opening.
Oh, well, that's true too.
Yeah, I don't know if Florida's not
hiring a G5 coach.
They wouldn't hire another, especially at Louisiana, right?
It'd
be too similar. It'd be too similar.
Florida wants Lane Kiffin. Let's put it this way, Ross. That game you were at yesterday, there were a lot of happy people in Gainesville when Georgia won, because they do not want Ole Miss to be undefeated.
Rooting for the Bulldogs, for sure, and that makes sense. I know that they wanted him 3 or 4 years ago, right? And
they did. Well, the fans did. The administration didn't. That is now changed. Everybody now on the same page on that front.
That's why
it'll be up to Mr. Kiffin to decide whether he wants to or not.
That's why Lane's talking about his sobriety and making fake documentaries on ESPN about how he's a different man.
It was a real documentary, Stephen Godfrey.
Of course.
It took an hour of my television time.
It counted. No, there's been a lot of well-placed, I would say, character rehab for Lane in between this Florida search and the last Florida search, to Andy's point, and he seems way more palatable at a premier helmet destination than he did on the last cycle. Sorry, Ole Miss.
Well, and the thing is, Ole Miss ain't done. Like, they have one loss. They might not lose again. So this is all
at Oklahoma this week. Is
Oklahoma.
Tough.
Oklahoma's the one.
Actually, guys, I'm glad you brought that up, Ross, because we have a lot of other games that we need to talk about.
We do.
Oklahoma bouncing back. Texas bouncing backward. And then a couple interim coaches just kicking ass. We'll talk about it when we come back. We're back at the College Football Inquirer, and I do want to remind you, if you'd like to watch us on video, if you'd like to see the state of Ross Dellenger's hotel room, which every Sunday that's an adventure.
It's
join us.
I didn't make my bed. Andy. See it behind me.
It's a messy bed.
They have people for that, so that's fine.
Yeah.
So if you want to watch us in moving pictures, turn on your smart TV, look at the home screen, find the icon that says Yahoo Sports Network. And you can find our show along with all the other beautiful shows that Yahoo produces. Or if you'd like to watch on a phone, on a tablet, any device, anytime, day or night, yahoosports.tv is the place to go. yahoosports.tv to get the Yahoo Sports Network and all the shows, including this here College Football Inquirer. Gentlemen, Brent Venables left the State Fair of Texas. Very sad person. I was at that game. Oklahoma looked horrendous against Texas. Oklahoma looked as good at Williams-Brice Stadium against South Carolina on Saturday as they looked bad against Texas the week before. The Sooners looked like John Mateer's a little bit healthier. The defense was dominant. I believe they held South Carolina to 1.9 yards a carry. They looked awesome and like a team that can still make the college football playoff. Oh, by the way, they host Ole Miss this week.
That's going to be a game,
big one,
especially for Ole Miss coming off that. Yeah. Are we jumping around? Because I want to shout out real fast. We have a shakeup in the G5 playoff race. Memphis goes down.
Yeah. Let's go there because that was a shocking result.
I have been tracking UAB for an unrelated project. I'll say that. Okay. So I've been a little more familiar with UAB season than most. I can't throw the hyperbole on enough, boys, that like for UAB to come out and play the game the way they did without Jalen Kitna. Alex Mortensen, the interim head coach, son of the late Chris Mortensen from ESPN, truly a wonderful, nice human being. Man, that's like just a great piece of catharsis, and it was just a sweet moment. He gets dunked with the water. He gets dunked with the Gatorade. Memphis goes down. UAB kind of hung on there towards the end. Memphis started to
one of the most painful final sequences that you will ever see because it looked like
fourth
Memphis
down review.
Well, it looked like Memphis was going to score or had scored because the quarterback, it looks like he stopped a little short of the end zone. Then you look at the replay and maybe he's rolling over the tackler across the goal line. They decide he's short, and so you have 1st and goal, and then multiple plays, multiple reviews, multiple flags.
Yeah.
It ends with a 4th and 11 where they throw it and it's caught, but out of bounds, and then reviewed again. And then finally, Alex Mortensen gets to celebrate.
What a story.
Amazing. If you've watched how dead that program's been, at one point they had a stat after they fired Dilfer. The gap between road wins under Dilfer was longer than the gap between road wins when the program was shut down. That's how bad it had been.
Oh my God.
In the G5 really fast, Charles Huff, USM, 5 wins, turning around Southern Miss. And then also I wanted to shout out Jason Eck, who took a New Mexico job that nobody wanted. 4-3 now, like 2 wins away from bowl eligibility.
Former Wisconsin offensive lineman Jason Eck, in case Wisconsin might need a new coach at some point down the road. Cough, 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 cough.
You might want to look into that. Absolutely.
How about, we talked about the coaching carousel and what might happen there. And look, we're going to probably there's going to be so many job openings. We're going to have lower to mid-tier power conference coaches move up, like we've seen happen plenty. And one of those may just be in Minneapolis.
Yes,
Minnesota.
That's a really
PJ
good point.
Fleck pulls off the win against Matt Rule, the projected Penn State coach, 24-6.
I don't think I'm telling Minnesota fans anything they haven't suspected, but Fleck has been pretty aggressive in trying to find a way to bridge out of Minneapolis. And Ross, to your point, this is the market in which he gets that done.
Yep.
By the way, if you want to coach 6-1 Houston, Willie Fritz just makes things better. Every single place he goes.
Well, can I shout out another interim coach?
Yes, I think I know where you're going.
Tim Skipper at UCLA.
Dude, they did it again.
3-1 as the UCLA interim. They walked off Maryland. Well, they didn't walk him off. They had to kick the kick off. Nico Iamaleava gets hurt. He comes back to lead the field goal drive. And Tim Skipper has done a fabulous job. Now, he actually had to hire new coordinators. So he hired Kevin Coyle, got him from Syracuse. This is a guy that Tim Skipper worked with at Fresno State, but got him from Syracuse. That basically the day Skipper gets elevated after Deshaun Foster gets fired, he then elevates Jerry Neuheisel a week into the experiment after they fire Tino Sunseri, and they're a wagon. They play at Indiana this week, and I'm telling you, like, both these teams beat Michigan State the same way in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, that's going to be interesting. I think that's going to be. Hey, how about yesterday I tweeted out after Georgia Tech won that they, could complete the regular season, excluding the Georgia game at the end of the season, without playing a top 25 team. I got the Ramblin' Wreck on my ass because they reminded me that Clemson was ranked at the time. The College Football Playoff Selection Committee does not consider teams that were ranked in the preseason or even during the season, during the game. It's, are you ranked at the end of the regular season?
We know.
So just a reminder there. But hey, the Ramblin' Wreck's rambling.
We know it's your bias. We understand.
7-0 for the first time since 66, by the way.
Another G5 shout out, North Texas at 6-1. That's not that big a deal, except they got a huge monkey off their back, which was UTSA, that they had found ways to lose to over and over again as they try and become UTSA, because that's what they were before UTSA existed. So it's getting tight in the American. That 12 slot is not guaranteed.
That win. Godfrey, did you see the Tulane touchdown?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
The winning touchdown with like 20 seconds left, bounced around the receiver's hands, caught it in the end zone, and the Green Wave come back to beat Army.
Yeah, we've got a log jam for 25.
Great wins. Let's talk about a win that Steve Sarkisian's just happy to have and would rather never think about again.
That was like Iowa. That was like one of those Iowa, like Purdue games.
I want to apologize to Iowa guys because Iowa alumnus Mark Stoops is making Kentucky more Iowa than Iowa has ever thought about.
Kentucky should have beaten Texas. Kentucky had the ball at the goal line in the first overtime.
They called the same crappy run play twice that went into the teeth of a superior defensive line.
And then Stoops yelled at somebody on the sideline, like a coach. I can't remember who it was, but he yelled at somebody. It looked like he was yelling about the play call, about the last, the play call right in the middle, boom, of the Texas front.
You know what? I didn't see that, so credit to him for identifying how miserable a tactic it was, because obviously it cost them the game. I was fine going for it on fourth down. That's not the decision. At least call the same play and then just boot the quarterback. Do something. Everybody was in one place. It's one of the worst offensive performances I've seen all year. Terrible.
And they should have beaten Texas because speaking of the worst offensive, Texas was terrible on offense. The Texas offensive line that looked like it got a little better in the second half against Oklahoma turned back into a pumpkin. Arch Manning was not good.
Total regression. Yeah.
This is so Texas is still hanging by the skin of its teeth in the college football playoff race. I do not see is Vanderbilt going to be favored at Texas? Is that do we live in that world? I mean, Vandy probably has to beat Missouri this week to make that happen.
Yeah, right. They got to beat Missouri, and maybe they will if it's Missouri. By the way, we haven't mentioned. Did we not mention Tennessee, Alabama? Of all the games,
we did a little bit
early on, but of course another loss for me on the spread. So thanks for the 99-yard pick six before halftime. That really changed the complexion completely.
Alabama looks like the best team in the SEC right now.
Yeah, I would say that too.
How they lost to Florida State, I don't know. But Ty Simpson is playing incredible. Everything about Alabama seems to be hitting on all cylinders. They got through this 4-game stretch of Georgia, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Tennessee, 4-0. I think they're going to be fine. They play South Carolina next before they get an open date before LSU. South Carolina is completely reeling. South Carolina is in deep, deep trouble.
I wonder, I think, Andy, if there's a job open that you could maybe PR your way into the logic of leaving and getting out and resetting your clock, as we say.
Are you saying that an alum of a certain university that has a job opening,
last
is not
names
living up to expectations at South Carolina? Yeah, Shane Beamer. I wouldn't leave if I were Shane Beamer because they gave me an extension for no reason in the offseason, which means the buyout is massive. So I would just make them fire me, which they might not need to because they're not going to fire you after this season anyway. So you might have a good season next year and they'll give you another dumb extension.
Yeah,
so
it's possible.
I don't think you should do that. But hey, if you wanted to reset your clock, you could do that. But yeah, it's
easier.
I don't worry about South Carolina beating Alabama. Where preseason, I would have said this game is going to be awesome. I'm not worried about Alabama there. So
the Tide are rolling. 4 straight ranked wins, and they look like a different team than the one we saw in the season opener. And so does Florida State, by the way.
Yeah, very. One more game I want to hit on. We touched on it very briefly, but let's BYU winning the Holy War.
Yeah,
this is huge for Kalani Sitake. I feel like they are now. They're not in control of the Big 12 because they've got some tough games left. But the Big 12 teams in the race, there's going to be a lot of playing each other coming up because Texas Tech and BYU play on November 8th. BYU, I believe, is at Iowa State, at Texas Tech. They're also at Cincinnati. So they will have to completely earn this thing if they're going to do it. But they're in position.
I forgot about 23, where they were 5-7 and transitioned into the Big 12. But really, they have arrived at the Big 12 and almost become like premier brand in the Big 12. And we kind of short shrift them every year. They are 17-2 in the last 2 seasons. That's insane.
Yeah, and they just missed out last year on playing in the Big 12 championship game because the tiebreaker, I believe. And they were kind of one of those teams last year. I felt like that, we're on the playoff bubble, but weren't really talked about as a serious playoff team. But they're pretty damn good. And I think we're starting to see it this year carry over.
Very good. We didn't really touch on Missouri as much as I want to, but I would just say, hey, if I'm Eli Drinkwitz, life is very good right now with a lot of different job openings.
A lot of jobs popping open.
I mean, for Eli Drinkwitz, nothing bad can happen to you. Basically, you are going to get piles of money thrown at you by other people and by Missouri, and you just decide what you want to do.
Andy, just because I got yelled at the last time I only mentioned a program in relation to its coach leaving, USF fans got mad at me. Missouri still very much alive and contending it just as anyone is for a playoff spot. So I want to be able to clarify.
Big game this
Missouri
weekend.
Vandy is not even an elimination game. Like, they can both lose and still be in the hunt.
That's insane. But it's very accurate.
It's pretty crazy. But likely, right? But given the rest of their schedules, the winner of this game is probably, a lot better chance to certainly make the playoff. And probably the winner of this game, maybe even favored to make the playoff. I mean, they might be over 40% chance of making the playoff.
Missouri's draw is not bad. They still have to play Texas A&M, but if you have the mulligan in your pocket,
right?
Like they have to play Texas A&M and Oklahoma. So if you beat Vanderbilt, you've got to split A&M and Oklahoma probably, because unless you get Petrino'd at the end of the season, but you got a shot. And then Vandy, you look at them the rest of the way. If they win, they got to beat Texas, but they don't have to beat Texas, and they have Auburn and Tennessee. So I'd say 2-1 against Texas, Auburn, and Tennessee. You got to figure out how to manage that, but it's doable.
Every ranked team in the SEC is still technically alive for a playoff bid. LSU feels like it's probably the least likely of that situation.
Right.
And with that number, which I can't count in my head as I talk, I want to say it's 12 or 13 teams ranked. It's not going to be really, we're going to have a cloudy picture on the SEC's at-large bids probably going into championship week.
Yeah. No, this is going to be a lot of fun the rest of the way, because you're going to get this in all the leagues with everybody playing conference games everywhere. And Steve Sarkisian said it after the Texas Longhorns survived in Lexington. He said, hey, half the teams in the SEC lost today, and we weren't one of them. So that's a good thing. Now, granted, another person in that half the teams that one club might be fired soon. So I don't know how much solace it is, but Sark's not getting fired. He's fine. He's just got to figure out how to make his offense work like it did in the Oklahoma game. Gentlemen, what a fun week. And guess what? It only gets better from here. We'll be back on Tuesday with more College Football Inquirer.